What is going on, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to your go-to Pacers podcast. And just like that, after an in-season tournament championship game, the Pacers are back in action. They're in Detroit. They take care of business 131-123 behind the play of Bennedict Mathurin. Facci is here to talk with me about this game. Facci, good win for the Pacers.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. I mean, it would have been an embarrassing loss if it happened, but
The
I
20th,
just felt like,
the
yeah,
20th
and
loss in a row for Detroit.
20th loss in a row for Detroit. I don't think you or I would have ever thought this when, the Pistons were winning championships and after the Malice at the Palace and all of that, because everything was so great for them. Nothing's been good ever since. But this was a game that you had to have. How are you going to respond after the in-season tournament loss in the championship to the Lakers? Well, we saw this Pacers team shoot it as hot as could be, about 74% in the first quarter, but Detroit still managed to really hang around for a decent chunk of this game, but nonetheless, the Pacers got the win.
They sure did, Facci. And I think we should start off with Bennedict Mathurin just because he had an awesome game tonight. He was locked in. He
He
was
did.
focused. He had 30 points. He had 7 rebounds, and he had a career high, 8 assists. He was fantastic in this game. In 30 minutes, he was a +8. In 37 minutes, he was a +8. So you just love seeing that, and you love seeing how Rick Carlisle kind of allowed him to continue to play and made rotations different and kept him out there longer because of the play that he was playing at. He was playing at such a high level.
Yeah, he really was, and he is exactly where we have to start because this was that kind of performance for Bennedict Mathurin. You maybe took a little bit for granted last year, not the assists total because that's a career high. That's awesome to see, but the 30 points, it was something he was doing a lot more often last year, and this is his best game of the season. One of the best games I think he's had in his first 2 seasons
Mm.
because the ball movement it was there in a time where it's been there more often this year than in the past. But 8 assists, you can't overlook it. I felt that Mathurin threw this team on his back in the first half. He had 16 points. But if you want to just talk about how he finished the game, second half, 14 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. It was a complete game for Bennedict Mathurin and a very encouraging performance because you know how the fans have been. People have been really starting to sour on Mathurin. That's back-to-back games where I feel that he's brought it. Against the Lakers, he also had 20 points. So nice to see him start to get in a little bit of a rhythm.
Yeah, that's back-to-back games where he's been a leading scorer. So that's good to see. Obviously, Tyrese had 22 against the Lakers, but Mathurin had 20 as well. So I just think that this is the kind of performance when you see it from Mathurin, it gets you excited because everybody that has been on the Mathurin bandwagon and believes that he is potentially that number 2 guy next to Tyrese. Now, me and you both have been very adamant that we don't know if he is that number 2 guy yet. We've been more kind of like maybe a third guy, but I think tonight is why fans get excited and hopeful for why he could be that number 2 guy. I'm trying to not overthink this just because it was the Detroit Pistons. It is a team that has lost now 20 games in a row that Mathurin had this breakout performance in. I just want to see that more consistently from Mathurin before I'm ready to jump on the bandwagon and say, okay, he can really do it. I don't want to be dismissive of what he did tonight because it was special. And I think that he's continuing to kind of showcase who he is as a player and figure out how to fit into the system. But I don't know if you were able to hear the post-game press conference with Jeremiah Johnson or anything like that, but that sideline interview was great, and I thought that Mathurin had an awesome answer because JJ was like, "Look, you had a 20-point game against the Lakers. Is that a building block for you? Having a good performance like that?" He said, "I don't think it's about the points. It's about how I come in the game and impact the game. At the end of the day, all I want to do is win. If I have to score 30, if I have to grab 7 rebounds or 25 rebounds, the main goal is for me to win and do whatever it takes." So I love that attitude from him, but it also sounds a lot like Rick Carlisle and what he has been preaching to everybody when he's been talking about Mathurin, and especially when people have been frustrated with his minutes.
Nearly brought a tear to my eye. That is the exact answer you want to hear from a guy like Bennedict Mathurin, who wants to score. But there's so much more to the game than just scoring. And I just feel like the type of performance that he had tonight, he wasn't having last year. I know I mentioned, might have been dropping 30, but the rebounding wasn't there last year. The assists, like tonight, was not there last year. So great to see him being more of a well-rounded player. And I think he knows that that's what he needs to do in order to stay on the court, especially in meaningful minutes. And I think the Mathurin slander, it's been pretty wild this year. I had a friend who texted me the other day. He is a Knicks fan, so take it with a grain of salt. He said, "Does Mathurin stink?" And I went, "What?" I was like, "No, he doesn't stink." I was like, he's like, "Well, he's only averaging under 14 points." I'm like, "I get it, but this team is better. They're looking for him to do more than just score." And tonight was that example of that. The 30 points is fantastic, but the eight assists, that's what had me doing a double take. At one point, once he got to 6 assists, I was like, wow, I didn't even realize he has that many assists. Then when he kept going, I was like, okay, this is just a career performance from him. So I was really happy with what I saw, but that quote that you mentioned, I mean, that might have made me even happier.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say this. Part of the reason I think Mathurin has benefited a little bit more recently by playing with the second unit is just being able to see the basketball a little bit more. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is he ended up making a layup to put the Pacers up by 8, 107-99, Facci, with about 9 minutes and 40 seconds left in the game. That was the last basket that he made. And it was the second to last shot that he actually took in the game. He took one more layup and missed it when it was 107-101. And the Pacers ended up making a bunch of substitutions. Tyrese, Bruce Brown, and Myles Turner came into the game. Mathurin didn't shoot the ball the rest of the game. And I think that that's kind of a small sample size, obviously, in just this game, but I think it also kind of tells you why it's kind of hard for him, because he goes from kind of being the offensive initiator, getting him the ball, finding actions for him to get the ball. And then they kind of just went away from that after he had the hot hand and give the Tyrese, let him kind of do his thing. And Mathurin just kind of standing in the corner, not doing a whole lot. So I think that they need to find a better balance, especially when he's going hot like this, to get him more looks. But it was like, I don't feel like the Pistons were overplaying him either. Like, yeah, they were tight on him, but like it wasn't like they were overplaying him that he couldn't get open. And a lot of the actions went to the other side of the court with Buddy and Bruce and Myles and Tyrese. And it's like that was one of the guys that was part of that five right there, besides Buddy. You know, Buddy wasn't a part of that original starting five, but it kind of makes you realize, like, okay, he's been cooking. Why don't you keep feeding him the basketball like you would anybody else on the team? And especially with Tyrese out there. Like, Tyrese is going to draw that attention. So, like, just run a 2-man action, 3-man action with him, Turner, and Mathurin. But no, he just kind of got stuck there in the corner, and he ended up getting some free throws at the end of the game. But I was just a little bit disappointed to see when the starters kind of came back in with him, he really didn't get much of a look.
That's a good point, and I think that is tough because, I mean, there's a lot of very capable scorers out there with those starters. So he obviously could have had a more special game, but nonetheless, I am happy with the performance. And you talked about the tension that Tyrese draws. I thought the Pistons played good defense on him in the first half. I felt that this was another half where Tyrese wasn't able to really get in flow. 2 of 6 in the first half. I mean, the assists, he had eight assists, but the turnovers, it was a bit of a messy game for Tyrese. I believe he finished with 6 turnovers. That's
7,
something you're
actually.
not used. 7. Okay, all right. So unfortunately, even worse. The 7 turnovers, I believe, is a season high because he had
Yeah.
6 turnovers against the Hawks earlier. But that's not a typical game because for Halliburton by any means, because there was a stretch where he just had 28 assists to 0 turnovers. So for him to have 7 in one game, usually that takes him about a week. So it just shows that whatever it was, the Pistons were able to take him out of his flow. But in this second half, I felt that Halliburton, well, specifically the fourth quarter, Halliburton pours in 8 points, ends up finishing the game with, was it 16 assists?
Yeah, 16 assists, 14 points. He had 7 turnovers, but he also had 2 blocks and a steal, 4 rebounds. He was a +8 for the game. He was kind of getting into it with Beef Stew a little bit. I don't know if you were able to see any of that, but that
I
was really
saw that. I
funny.
did. Yep.
Beef Stew guarded
Not
him
a guy you want to
pretty.
get into it
It
with.
it was funny because Beef Stew actually guarded him pretty well on one play. And when he knocked Halliburton down, he kind of stared at Halliburton like he blocked a shot or something like that. And he just kind of stared at Halliburton, mean mugged him for like a second, and then ran back down the court. Well, then later Tyrese crossed him up and hit a 3 on him. And so the two were talking back and forth. And I don't know if Tyrese Halliburton saw Beef Stew go at LeBron James. I don't think Beef Stew's the guy that I'd be wanting to pick a
I don't know if
fight
he
with.
did.
Uh, and I kind of thought about that during
No.
the game. You know, I'm like, this Pistons team is trash. They're just not a good basketball team. And they have good players on them, but I just don't think they have the right infrastructure right now to build something special. And I'm not totally sold on Monty Williams as the guy that should be the ringleader for that team. But
A
Beef
lot of
Stew,
money. A lot of
lot of
money.
well, I thought that was the worst coaching signing in a long time. I mean, how
I'll
do you
admit you
lose?
didn't like it from the start. I definitely remember that. I
He was
remember that.
awful. I mean, what did he do with Phoenix? The team regressed under him, and they had Kevin Durant. He
Yeah,
can't
I
he.
mean, at that point,
I feel like he loses the locker room, and I think there's a reason why. And I'm just speculating from what I've seen from the outside. It feels like he kind of plays favorites, and he's getting a little bit of a pass because he's had a long time NBA career playing, being an assistant, coaching elsewhere. But like, imagine if like, it kind of felt like how Nate Bjorkgren kind of treated the players here, and
ooh,
players just felt
wow,
that
that says a
disconnect.
lot.
It's not as bad, obviously, but like the
Yeah, that was
disconnect that
bad. I mean,
he has had with people. It's like how many players have had like a little bit of a tiff with him, like Jaden Ivey this year, like in the first season. Like he didn't even
definitely.
talk to Jaden Ivey about coming off the bench after he was a starter last year.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
How do you
I
not
didn't
have
like that.
communication with your players in the offseason? Same with DeAndre Ayton. Like that to me, just like even if Ayton is kind of a headache.
That's a good point because that sounded like I could not believe that they just like didn't speak for like a whole summer and then that led into the year. So that is a great point because that relationship, I could not believe it had gone that south. So
Mm.
valid point.
Anyway, we're talking too much about the Pistons. They lost 20 in a row. I don't really care about the Pistons, but beef stew. Is that somebody you would like on the Pacers? Somebody like a beef stew?
Yeah, you need an enforcer. The Pacers need some toughness. And I just feel like there was a recent voting. I mean, I don't remember what it was, but the players voted on it of like players that you wouldn't want to mess with. And he was the name that came up the most.
Yeah.
That happened like about a week ago. The Pacers don't have anyone like that. They had that last year with James Johnson. James Johnson didn't really need to be on the court, but it was everybody knew, oh, no, you don't mess with James Johnson. And I just feel like Udonis Haslam was another one of those guys. Like Beef Stew, like he's bringing toughness. Pacers right now, who's the tough guy on the team? I don't know. Like
Neesmith. That's
I don't
it.
want to. That's what I was gonna say. But like Neesmith's like playing tough. Like, is he gonna be an enforcer? Like, I don't think so. I think he's gonna play tough defense. Beef Stew. That is someone. That's one of the last guys you want to get in a tussle with. That
Yeah.
I would say.
When you think about that Lakers game and just how much we got bullied down low, I'm not saying Beef Stew's like this big stopper or anything like that, but just 6'7", 6'8" guy that I think he actually defends pretty well in space. Like
Yeah.
for how big that he is, he moves his feet well. Like Tyrese wasn't able just to get right by him, but I feel like he would also be really good defensively down low, just battling against like an Anthony Davis. Like he's going to probably get 6 fouls in like 20 minutes, but I would live with that
Yes.
just because he's making Anthony Davis work for it. So we don't really need a beef stew. I mean, we can maybe use some depth at the power forward, maybe a little bit stronger of a player. Like if I could trade Jordan Nwora for beef stew, I would do it in a heartbeat, right? That
Yes.
kind of a deal. But I'm
Absolutely.
not trading anything of significant value for beef stew because I don't think beef stew's a starting forward in this league. I think he's a backup, and he's having to do quite a bit for the
Yes.
Pistons. So it's just like I just love
Quite a
the
lot.
tenacity, man. I love the toughness.
He's he's a starter on a team that's lost 20 straight games.
Yeah.
But in this game, one thing that I do want to give Detroit a compliment of is Asar Thompson. I really like him. I
He's a
really
good
like
star,
him.
man.
And I mean, 20 points tonight, 6 boards, but I just think that he does a lot of stuff well. He had a block, he had a steal, and like I just feel like how overblown was it about the Thompson twins? They can't shoot. I don't know about them. And now you look at this and it's like we're getting no production out of Jarris Walker. And we just missed out on Asar Thompson. I know that it seemed that the Pacers had interest. Obviously, that workout gets canceled late or whatever it was. Detroit ends up going and they take him before the Pacers even get a shot at him. But that would have been a player that I think would have been great in Indiana for years to come. And I think that that's really unfortunate. So I feel like I was kind of window shopping, looking at him like, man, what could have been? I think that would have been awesome, but obviously we know it didn't work out that way.
Well, and I mean a good point on Sarah Thompson and Jarris Walker, kind of comparing the two. Jarris Walker, the Pacers. I think the Pacers probably take Asar Thompson if he's still on the board at 7 or 8.
I think so.
Especially if he's there at 7. I doubt they trade back to 8. I think they would have just taken him. But at the same time, Jarris Walker, the reason he's not playing is because he's just not as ready. But I don't think that would be the case for Asar Thompson if he was drafted to the Pacers. I think he would actually have found a way to get into the rotation because I think he's a little bit more ready. And I just think he's a little bit more talented overall. I worry about Jarris Walker's offense, and I think that could be part of the problem he's not playing. But I just think the Pacers feel more comfortable with Obi Toppin. and Aaron Nesmith at this point. But I want to jump back to the Pacers real quick because obviously Myles Turner, we kind of rode him hard after that
We did.
performance that he had, and it was not a good one. There's a lot of people that talked about that. Thankfully that game doesn't count because it was bad. But I thought he had a great bounce back game. Facci 10 of 15 from the floor, 23 points, 8 rebounds, only got 2 fouls, which was great. Had 3 blocks. Was a little bit more impactful. This one plus 12. I think that was the best of anybody on the team. So, Myles Turner in 31 minutes, pretty good bounce back game for him.
No, it really was 7 points in the fourth quarter. I felt that Turner was someone that brought it, and you needed him to, and you wanted to see how could he respond, and he did. I think that Turner was one of the definite bright spots for this Pacers team. I mean, last game we mentioned didn't have a block against the Lakers. The 3 tonight, awesome to see. I was encouraged by that performance. Nice to see Buddy bounce back as well. Buddy had, I think it was 11 at halftime, finishes the game with 16 points, but 6 of 9 shooting, 4 of 7 from 3. You knew eventually he would get it going. It is, like I said, with everything you could basically say, it is Detroit. You wanted Buddy to show up a little bit more against, the ball, the Milwaukee's and, and the Lakers. But nonetheless, I hope that Buddy can put together a string of better performances. And Bruce Brown rebounded well. 9 boards tonight. The shot wasn't falling as much as 4 of 11. 9 rebounds out of any Pacer you can't complain about. So that was good to see. But then, Alex, what about the guy that we really didn't see tonight in Obi Toppin? I mean, in a blink of an eye, I didn't realize how long he had been out. I don't believe Obi Toppin came back in whenever he 12 minutes in this game. I felt like that was interesting. Was there anything that you saw that maybe was like, what led to this?
Not necessarily. I mean, wasn't great defensively, obviously.
Yeah.
Kind of looked like Casper out there, a ghost. But
Yep.
I just, I don't know. Like, he was fine. I don't really think, like, it's the Pistons, and it's like nobody really played that bad. But maybe his energy was just a little bit down. I thought he had some good like transition baskets as well. I know Tyrese fed him on a couple of dunks there, so it's like, okay, I don't really think he was that bad. And I mean, it wasn't like they were playing Nesmith a ton of extra minutes. Nesmith played 27. That feels about normal for him. They did go a little bit smaller. They played Buddy Hield once again over 30 minutes because Rick Carlisle can't help himself. No matter how good or bad the team's doing, Buddy Hield's going to play 30 minutes a game. And then Bruce Brown played 37 minutes, so it was kind of like they went a little bit smaller. I know Detroit did go a little bit smaller too, so maybe they were kind of just, counter, responding to what the Pistons were doing. But I didn't think Toppin played like a terrible game. I don't think he really did much. He was only in there for 12 minutes, like you said. So he just didn't really get back in, I think, in the second and fourth quarters that much. I could be wrong on the minutes, but it just feel like he really didn't come back into the game. And that's part of the reason why when Ben Mathurin gets 30 points and they're playing him 37 minutes, they kind of adjusted and put Bruce Brown back in more at the 4 than playing Obi, and then Nesmith kind of rotated in there a little bit as well. But you touched on the point that was really big, and that was Buddy Hield getting his shooting stroke back. 4 of 7 tonight from 3, 6 of 9 from the field. But the team in general still didn't shoot the ball particularly well. They shot okay, but 13 of 31 from 3 for 41.9%. That's good. That's a good percentage.
You can live with it. 42%.
Low. 13 made threes feels low.
I know it does, because I think you're used to seeing the Pacers shoot up like about 40 plus threes.
Yeah.
So the 31 attempts, a little bit low. I thought the Pacers fouled a lot. I mean, Detroit goes to the line 30. They shoot 30 free throws in this game.
Yeah.
At one point,
20 to 18 on foul calls.
Yeah, at one point it was like 27 free throw attempts for Detroit to about, I want to say like 7 or 8 for the Pacers, before the Pacers ended up getting more free throws later in the fourth. But I bet that was keeping Detroit alive in this game. Let's be honest. This is a Detroit team that averages just under 109 points. They scored 123. Yeah. I mean, they shot 55% from the field. So not what you want to see, but I want to give a quick shout out to Chase Hoops. You can see him on Twitter, always tweeting about the Pacers. He brought it up to me. He was right. The loophole in the system, Alex, the Pacers remain undefeated, 8-0, when Aaron Nesmith scores a double-digit figures, because it didn't count against the Los Angeles Lakers. So how about that? Nesmith does it tonight with 13 points, and the streak is alive. The loophole in the system.
Are we counting this as a 4-game winning streak, Facci?
I think we're counting it as a 4-game winning streak. I don't know. We're so like, what do you do? But technically it is a 4-game winning
That
streak,
that's
even if
what
it doesn't
that's
feel like it.
what the stats say on ESPN. The Pacers are on
That's
a
true.
4-game winning streak. Okay, so you can't argue with that. If you don't agree with it, don't blame us. Blame the rules. Okay, that's how they have it. Also on a 4-game winning streak, the Chicago Bulls. Surprising? I think so.
Yes. Yeah.
No Zach LaVine, they're winning games. Shocker. Let's go trade for
Yep.
him, Facci. He's a winner.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
no, but I do want to just touch quickly. Tyrese Halliburton, obviously, we talked about him a little bit, not having a great game, but still 14 and 16, was able to make some big shots there at the end of the game. Like, obviously, Tyrese does what he does. I mean, we're not going to overpraise him for what he did, but like, just still was really impactful in a game where you felt like he wasn't nearly as impactful. Isaiah Jackson, I thought he gave some good minutes again. Maybe
Yeah.
he could have, I think he was the only one with a bad plus minus, was a -4 in the game, but still, I mean, I thought he played pretty decent in the minutes that he did play. 10 points, 5 of 6 shooting. But we got to just kind of close this thing out. Just talking quickly about TJ McConnell in the backup point guard minutes. Once again, I feel like he provides the energy that they need and didn't take a lot of bad shots in this game. And I felt like, he wasn't as impactful maybe as he had been in a couple of games ago, and especially in the in-season tournament. Like, he had some really nice moments there. But I think this is kind of like the leverage of like having this type of player on your roster when he wasn't in the rotation, and just being able to just find a way to continue to be ready. And I think that's a big thing about McConnell. It talks about his professionalism. No Nimhard now, and like, you really need to rely on him. Like, he's not moping about it. Like, he's just been a great teammate, and he stepped up when he's been called upon. And I've really been impressed with the maturity and the professionalism of TJ McConnell.
He's a pro's pro. I mean, he's as professional as it gets. And I know in the beginning of the year, it felt like having 3 point guards was too much. Like, oh man, let's trade McConnell for 2 second-round picks. I don't. What are those 2 second-round picks doing for the Pacers this year? It would have been nothing.
We got 4
No
picks this year,
contributions at
Facci.
all.
4.
We have enough picks. Having McConnell, especially in a scenario where Nembhard has been in and out of the lineup, it's been various injuries. I feel for him. He's had just a different issue dating back to the summer. It was with kidney stones. He had, I mean, it's obviously now it's the knee. He was a back
The back
injury at one
injury,
point. I
that's
think
what he missed some time
exactly.
for.
He's had a few different injuries. So to have McConnell, who's always ready, it's huge. It might just be a spark for a couple of minutes. It might be him impacting a game in 20 minutes. Whatever it is, he stays ready. He is ready. He delivers to the Pacers night in, night out when needed. And right now, he is needed with no Andrew Nembhard.
For sure. And I mean, I just wanted to give him a shout out, because I know we've been a little bit hard on him back and forth here with just some of the stuff that he's done. But you got to give him credit. And like a game like this, like you need that energy, especially when Tyrese is struggling with turnovers. Had 8 assists, like we talked about in the first quarter, I think it was. But it was just like, you needed McConnell to come in there and kind of just give Tyrese a break and not make Tyrese expend so many minutes. Like 33 minutes for Tyrese feels pretty fair, considering all the minutes he's had to play the last couple of games, especially against Milwaukee and Boston and the Lakers in the championship. Like, you needed to make sure you didn't overburn Tyrese Halliburton, especially with a big game in Milwaukee. But I felt like the game was won at the end of the second quarter going into the third. The Pacers were down by 4 points. I believe the score was 61-57. And
It was
at the 9-minute mark, the Pistons called a timeout in the third quarter after coming out of half. During that stretch, the final 3 minutes of the second quarter and the first 3 minutes of the third, the Pacers outscored Detroit 18-4. And a lot of that was from Ben Mathurin, but I mean, it was just a group effort to get to that point. But I just thought that 18-4 run really flipped the script for the Pacers and just kind of allowed them to get that extra breathing room they needed after kind of getting themselves down in that second quarter to Detroit. And it's like, what are we doing? How are we getting down to this team? And they were able to keep Detroit, from really going on any big run during that moment. So I thought that was really special.
No, it was in specific. It was a 9-0 run to end the first half, because I remember being like, we're gonna trail to Detroit. Like, why can't anything be easy for the
Yeah.
Pacers? Like, why are we playing down to the competition once again? And I was like, I started already getting ahead of myself and being like, we're gonna be the team that Detroit breaks the streak against. Like, this happened to us last year when they lost a zillion games in a row and then they beat the Pacers. But that run that you mentioned, the 9-0 run to end the first half, the 18-4 run to, overall into the third quarter. I think that was the difference in the game because I felt the Pacers always had at least some sort of lead after that they were able to hold on to. Even if the game was close, you never felt like you were absolutely in danger at that point. The Pacers were able to maintain. So a win is a win. Nonetheless, no one's going to remember down the line, well, you were trailing at some point. Nope, you beat Detroit. You move on to 13-8. Alex, I feel good about this Pacers team right now. No, they're not perfect, but they're on their way towards something. And for that, man, there's just a little bit of a different vibe to this team coming off that in-season tournament. It feels like the ceiling's been raised a bit.
Yeah, your expectations are much higher for this team than they were to start the year off. And it's just like you come into this game and it's like, man, it feels so like underwhelming.
I agree.
Watching Indiana go from playing in a championship game to 2 days later playing Detroit on the road, a team that's lost 19 games in a row. I can't stress it enough. Now they've lost 20. I mean, they just lost 20 games in a row. I mean, that's so bad. The month of November, like they didn't get one win. They were going to be on the same path in December. Like I don't even know when they meet up with Washington, but that's like their only chance to maybe get a win. I mean, this is going to be a long.
And they already lost to them.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm just saying that's like their best chance to win, though. This is a long season for Detroit, and I don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of Pistons fans on my timeline and guys that cover the team just saying like, if this team like finishes with like 14 wins, under 20 wins, I got to fire everybody from top to bottom and rebuild this thing. And I'm like, I kind of agree with you. Like that's just unacceptable, especially where they're at with their rebuild. Like how many first round picks they've had. Now that was their third pick in a row in like the top 5 or 6. So that's problematic. But I don't want to. It's not a Pistons podcast, but I will just say I'm glad the Pacers have a infrastructure that allowed them to kind of go in a little bit of a tank. But look where they're at now. Like it could be a lot worse if things had gone sour and you fully embrace a completely tear down of a team and rebuild and trying to get the number 1 pick. The Pacers have done a really good job of rebuilding kind of on the fly a little bit and establishing that they needed a point guard. They got out and got Tyrese Halliburton. It was a huge pickup. And now we're feeling really confident because this team has ascended into a top 6, top 7 team in the Eastern Conference. You feel that. You really don't think like this is a team that's going to take a step back. Do they have the roster to win a 7-game series? Yes, I think they could, depending upon the opponent. But to get to the championship, probably not this year. But that's okay. I would rather take little steps like this each year to get closer to it than to be where the Pistons are at right now.
Exactly. Where the Pistons are at right now, I'm sorry, but there can't be anyone that believes there's any coming back from that and salvaging this season in any way. It's already way too late. I looked at their schedule. It's brutal. They play Philly twice. They got Milwaukee in there, then the Hawks. It's like there's really the Jazz.
Throwing the Hawks in there is a tough game after you bash me.
At this point, I mean, I was nowhere where you were as high on the Hawks, but when you look at this, it's like the Jazz are the only potential winnable game for Detroit in their next like 10 to 15 games. So it's going to be really ugly. I think this is going to be probably the longest losing streak that we've witnessed in maybe like 10 years or so. I remember when LeBron left Cleveland, that Cavs team was horrific. I mean, they lost maybe close to 30 games in a row. I feel like this Pistons team is not that bad, but the losing streak could be in that category. They're good players. They're just so young.
I think they've got a great young squad there.
Yeah,
I really believe in their young core of Ivy and Cunningham and Thompson.
Jalen
Duren. I love Jalen Duren. I think Jalen Duren's
I've always liked him, and he's still one of the youngest players in the league.
He's a monster. I mean, he's going to be very, very, very good once he can stay healthy and just get a nice. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do with their coaching situation. Like, maybe he stays, maybe he doesn't, but like that's a lot of money.
Paid too much money. Oh, the year one, like.
What are they?
Got to ride it.
They weren't
out at least another. Yeah, I don't think they were. I think they just were tired of losing, and we're just like, this is a guy who's coached at the highest level of championship caliber teams. Like he'll get the culture together, get everybody like that. So far, I mean, I just don't think that you could say like, okay, well, could he have done worse? I don't think so. The only way for the Pistons to be worse right now is for them to really not have a win. So I think that things have been way worse than anyone could have possibly imagined. And yeah, at this point, look, I'm happy that that's not us. We're
Yeah.
going through a short rebuild and on the come up. And for that, I'm really, really excited. I love where this Pacers team is at.
I love where it's at too, and they're going to have themselves a very tough game Wednesday night, 8:00 tip-off against the Milwaukee Bucks, a team they eliminated the week prior to that in the in-season tournament semifinals to get to the championship game. So Dame Lillard, he's going to be ready. It was Dame time. He did not play great in that game. Giannis is just going to feast like he always does, and we're going to have to see how the Bucks defend Tyrese Halliburton after Brook Lopez got put in the blender time and time again. So I think it's going to be a fun one. I'm just hoping the Pacers are up for it and they're not a little bit too tired, because basically a 2-week road trip is a very tough thing to go through in an NBA schedule. But, Pacers are just taking care of business. They've not lost a game yet during this road trip. The Lakers game does not count, ladies and gentlemen. So Facci.
Doesn't count. Doesn't count.
It doesn't count. It doesn't count against the record. We can't help it. But Facci, just go ahead. Let's close this one out. Tell the people where they can find us at.
Absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at PacersPod STP. You can find Alex on Twitter at AlexGoldenNBA. I can be found on Twitter at _FACCI. You can find us on Instagram at PacersPod STP. You can find us on Facebook at Set the Pace. You can find us on TikTok at Set the Pace. And Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
Ladies and gentlemen, go to youtube.com/setting the pace, a Pacers podcast. We can find all of our video content. Unfortunately, just like the Pacers-Lakers game vanished into the ether, so did the post-game video for YouTube. So that one will not be out there. I probably could have posted it, but I was very tired that night and did not feel like doing that. So you will get this game recap on the YouTube page, but the Lakers game did not count, so I cannot put that one up there. But with that being said, if you're excited for the Pacers to get this winning streak to 5 games and play the Milwaukee Bucks on Wednesday night, then Facci, hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers!
Setting the pace, going to the top. Setting the pace, going to the top. This is your #1 podcast. Sweeping every team. We gon' need a